Today's a sad day for the NYPD. When justice has not been served, the rule of law has been ignored. There's a saying within the police department that's been bantered around for some time that said, the job is dead. In reality, the job has been dying, and today, the job is dead. The job is dead because the leadership of this city and this police department is absolutely afraid of the criminal advocates and based this decision not on the facts, but based this decision on the politics. What makes it equally sad is due process is now gone for New York City police officers. This case was brought before a grand jury in Staten Island, a jury of our peers who voted no true bill. There's no evidence for indictment. That wasn't enough for our leaders, so then they pushed for a federal investigation. And there was one. There was two. Two completely different types of Washington administrations. And they, too, found no evidence of a crime. Then we had the trial room. And we sat down in that trial room for the second time when we can tell our story. And we sat there and went through the evidence frame by frame, second by second, in the calmness of a courtroom. And the evidence showed, and many of you saw, and the public saw as well, that this was not a crime. This was a chaotic situation. And for the trial commissioner to come out with a decision that says guilty based on 7 seconds, no, 4 seconds, is just absolutely wrong. All we've ever asked for New York City police officers is fairness in the process. We did not and have not gotten that. This was a tragedy, by all means. The Gardner family has been living with this death, and we truly understand that. And there is no such thing as closure for this family. Their family member is not coming home. But with that, what you do have to ask for is fairness for all, and we have not received that fairness. To stand and watch the press conference by the police commissioner to basically say that he followed the politics rather than the rule of law and the evidence is absolutely embarrassing. To try to say I was a cop for 34 years, but now I'm the commissioner, I go by different rules, is absolutely wrong. He has more of a responsibility to sometimes stand alone and make a proper, appropriate decision. He decided instead not to do that. He decided to run to the corner that has the loudest crowd. He decided to put self-preservation first over fact. And in doing that, he's firing a police officer who he even said almost 300 arrests, took numerous guns off the street, 14 commendations from the New York City Police Department, an exemplary police officer, not a troublemaker. That meant nothing. All that anything meant to him, the judge advocate, was 4 seconds. To say that you should, in a fight, to say that 4 seconds you're going to reevaluate a moving situation is just absolutely not truthful and not true. Anyone that has been a police officer knows every second counts. When you're getting possibly thrown through a plate glass window, your responsibility is to yourself, the person you're trying to arrest, and everyone else. But you should reevaluate in that 4 seconds is absolutely wrong. Today we hear and asking for a number of actions. Number one, we are asking for a no confidence vote in the mayor and the police commissioner of the city of New York. It's absolutely essential that the world know that the New York City Police Department is rudderless and frozen. The leadership has abandoned ship and left our police officers on the street alone, without backing. This is the police commissioner who went to that station house and said, "We have Officer Pantaleo's back. He did nothing wrong." So I ask, what's changed? The incident didn't change. The video didn't change. His opinion didn't change. But who changed it for him? For the mayor and the police commissioner, there's a long track record. The mayor has a long track record of abandoning his post. He left his post unattended to run across this country and try to get another job as president. There was chaos on the streets in Brooklyn this weekend. It took 15 hours for the mayor to respond and said, "That's not good. Don't do that." Where is the outrage when you have police officers getting hit with airmail, things coming off the roof, followed by real gunfire? That's not outrageous? That doesn't bring our mayor to passion? That doesn't say that the police commissioner should say, "This stops today," and send in the troops? There is no confidence in the leadership at City Hall and One Police Plaza. We are following up that with a call to the governor to have the mayor removed from office for malfeasance and nonfeasance. He abandoned his post. He refuses to do his job and has joined the anti-police rhetoric that we already know got 2 police officers killed. Now has caused the street to disrespect our uniform and the women and men wearing it, to dump buckets of water over their head, to throw bricks and concrete from the roof, and then to take out their weapons and fire on police. This mayor needs to be removed. The police commissioner needs to know he's lost his police department. To our members who are out in the street right now, no job is routine any longer. No job. We will be given instructions to our members because the leadership in the New York City Police Department refuses to give them instructions on how to keep themselves safe and go home at the end of the day and how to do their job. Every job, our police officers should be backing up. There's no routine job. This police officer Pantaleo, is now considered reckless. So that means we as police officers put our hand on someone, someone gets violent, and it ends with a tragedy, that we're now reckless. Every police officer needs to understand that right to the core of their marrow, to realize you're on your own. You have to back each other up. You have to call your sergeant immediately. If you put your hands on the public, call an ambulance, because no one will take you as truthful when you tell your story. We will be sending these steps to our member as we speak. Our members will know what they need to do. They need to go by the rules that the city has set forth. They say it's a guide, but now we turned out it's a guide until they decide it's not. So bring it up to the boss. Let them decide so you can protect yourself, so you won't get hit in the head with concrete. And at the end of the day, hopefully you can go home to your family. New York City police officers are dedicated. We just watched a police commissioner say that. But then he turned his back and walked away. What the police commissioner says, these things happen sometimes 2 or 3 times in a tour. He was a cop for 34 years. He knows that. He's been in that situation, but he decided to walk away anyway. Again, this is one of the saddest days in the NYPD for the way we instruct our police officers to do their job. The saddest, of course, is when we lose one of our own. But unfortunately, this atmosphere can lead to just that. And we're not being dramatic. We've seen it before. Questions? Yes, sir.
Maybe for Stu, how was Officer Pantaleo notified of this decision?
I received a phone call about 13 minutes before the police commissioner gave his press conference indicating that he would be terminated. I spoke to the officer. Obviously, he is disappointed, upset, but has a lot of strength and wants to go forward as strenuously as we will file an Article 78. We will continue with this case. After the Article 78, if we need to appeal it beyond that, we will. We're looking for him to get his job back, as Pat mentioned. When you talk about Maldonado's decision, it was horrific. Her talking about 3 to 4 seconds defining recklessness. If that defines recklessness, as Pat said, almost every arrest in the city is reckless. What I think happened was Commissioner Maldonado made a decision to find him guilty and then worked backwards. And she was hamstrung because the initial armbar was proper, the seatbelt was proper, the going up against the plate glass window was proper. So all she had was between 5 and 6 seconds to find his behavior inappropriate. And that's what she latched onto, which I think is ridiculous, arbitrary, and capricious, and will be part of the argument we make.
And as a quick follow-up, did they offer separation from the department with the fully vested pension as an option and then pull it off the table?
Officer Pantaleo has been an officer for 13 years. We, Pat and myself, were made an offer in this case of a vested pension. We sat down with the highest-ranking members of NYPD. We had a cup of coffee, and one thing was positive, that the pension was safe, that his wife, that his child would receive that pension, similar to the way Inspector Grant received his pension when he was under federal indictment. Clearly, Officer Pantaleo was not under federal indictment. As a matter of fact, if Maldonado had followed the federal government's reasoning that there was no misconduct and that a reasonable police officer would have done what Pantaleo did and there was no gross deviation, then he should have been found not guilty, and it shows how faulty her decision is. But yes, Pat and I were promised a vested pension Friday of last week. It was still going to happen. Saturday, they were preparing the paperwork. And then all of a sudden, after a press conference the mayor had with the PC, I then received a text, there'll be no paperwork prepared Saturday or Sunday. At that point, Pat and I realized the writing was on the wall, that they had been disingenuous when they indicated to us that he would receive a full pension and that the rug was being pulled out from under us. That's when we realized it on Saturday.
So you mean 2 days ago?
2 days ago.
Who made the offer? Who was the NYPD?
The highest-ranking member connected to O'Neill, without getting into the exact name. It couldn't have been a more definite, it couldn't have been a more vested offer. They realized not only that he had 13 years, but that most of this police department could leave tomorrow without having to give 30 days notice and get their full pension. Since Officer Pantaleo is not Tier 3, he's Tier 2, he didn't have that opportunity. That's what was articulated from NYPD to Pat and I to why they thought it was fair that he get a vested pension, even though they were aware there would be some people who would not be happy with that. And then all of a sudden, it went away.
What pension are you referring to, though?
Friday on the rice cookers.
Saturday, the rice cooker.
Saturday, the rice.
Rice cooker.
Yes.
In addition to the pension, was it also on the table that Officer Pantaleo would have to resign?
I think it's obvious that, unfortunately, although he wanted to stay as an officer, we all realize that his ability to be an enforcement officer was severely compromised based on the last 5 years. So yes, he was going to be leaving, he was going to separate, and he was going to get the 13 years that he was entitled to, the 13 years he had worked hard for, as all the other officers on this job could do without having to give 30 days notice.
As the public gets to do as well. Vested means vested. He put a vested out, they offered it, and they pulled it off the table. You look at the timing. You see a meeting with the mayor, a press conference with the mayor, it's pulled off the table. To stand here and think the mayor stayed out of this process for 5 years is absolutely a lie. He stood in Detroit and he said what he expects. The message was sent. I believe then he followed it up with a call.
So this
Question.
meeting, was this a face-to-face meeting with you guys and the person from O'Neill?
Face to face.
Yes, sir.
At One Police Plaza?
No.
No.
What's the significance of the flag behind it?
As I started with this job, with this press conference, the job is dead. One of the things we know is to turn the flag upside down is that we're in distress. Our police officers are in distress, not because they have a difficult job, not because they put themselves at danger, because they realize they're abandoned. The captain has jumped ship. The mayor told him to do it. And the streets are falling into chaos. This weekend is not the first. It's one of many. Anybody that's lived in this city knows the signs. To say that the streets and the quality of life have not gotten worse, then that means you're lying. You see it on the street. You see it every day that this is going on. And then to say it's all going to be okay, delusional. Yes, sir, I'm sorry. Quality of life. Crime does not go from 0 to 100 in a minute. It takes time. We've had the city council work against us with the mayor's backing to put the laws in place that are stripping us of our powers, where we have to stand there and just take it. This city is severely sliding. When was it that you saw that with impunity, perps can dump water, gang members can dump water over police officers' head and get away with it? Well, now we know why. Because the police officers that go out and do their job, put themselves at risk, will be abandoned by this department, and they have been.
What was Pantaleo doing when you found out, when you called him and gave him the news? And did you watch the commissioner speak earlier?
I don't think you watched the commissioner speak. I've been in touch with Danny since 7:30 this morning. I expected this decision, to be honest with you, so I had prepared him for it. He's away now, and I told him to stay away, that we will deal with the Article 78 and filing the paperwork, and there's nothing more he needs to give to NYPD. They've stripped him of everything he has.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that you were going to be sending out instructions to the rank and file, to officers sometime this afternoon.
Yes, ma'am.
What are those instructions specifically saying? Are you advocating for some sort of slowdown?
We're advocating for our members to protect themselves so they can protect the public. Realize you've been abandoned. You have to, number one, back each other up. You have to call your supervisor. Then we've listed a number of the patrol guide rules that they've made up, supposedly to help and protect our members. We're saying go by those rules. We will provide you a copy of that letter. It's not a secret. It's their rules. It's their guide. We're saying don't get yourself in trouble. The geniuses in headquarters made up these rules, so let's make sure we understand them. Educate yourself on them and use them, because at the end of the day, you're going to be abandoned if you don't. Yes, sir.
If you're sort of an average New Yorker on the street, what's going to be the practical implication of these new directives that you're sending out to the members? How will the public experience policing differently?
We've actually been living the practical implications for the public as well. You have a police department that's frozen. You have police officers out there that show up on the scene and don't know what to do because they're getting conflicting directions in what to do. They're being taught everybody, no matter what you deal with, is a good person. That's not so. We start from there, but when it turns bad, we have to do our job. But they're not teaching them anymore how to do that. They're not teaching them tactically when to make that decision. At the end of the day, if you're not compliant, it has to be, we're the police, put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest. They're getting conflicting messages in exactly what to do. It got worse today because this police officer, Pantaleo, did exactly what he was trained to do, did exactly what he was asked to do, did exactly what the neighborhood complained to the chief of department about. And the chief of department sent us out. And he did that job. It ended with tragedy, absolutely. But he did that job, and now he's got run over by the bus. You know, when this case first started, we stood in this very podium with this same backdrop, and we said, this mayor is throwing police officers under the bus. Now we backed over them.
Getting back to that meeting where they walked into the desk, how was that initiated? Did they call somebody forward you called them, and where was the meeting?
We've had numerous meetings with the police commissioner and others in the department, obviously pleading the case for Officer Pantaleo. It came out of those discussions. Someone over here? Yes, sir.
Yeah, the meeting, to pick up on the meeting.
Yes, sir.
There was a point where it collapsed. You're saying that they collapsed after a press conference. Which Saturday are you talking about?
I believe it collapsed after the mayor told him you can't do it. That's what I believe.
And is it, just clarifying the offer of separation with vested pension, is it possible that this high-ranking member of the department close to O'Neill is out over his skis, is essentially basically seeing if he could go that high and he'll get back to you, or was it a flat-out offer?
It was a flat-out, definite, 100%. You guys have no concerns about the pension. It's secure.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Follow up on that, Stu. The commissioner said that he gets the money back that he put in.
Correct.
For the pension. But he'd lose all supplementals and everything else and accrued benefit. How much would he have lost over the course of the 20-year projection?
Well, he would have gotten his pension in 7 years, and he would have gotten, I don't know the numbers, but probably more than $2,000 a month for the rest of his life, plus medical. All that's been taken away from him, his wife, his child.
The word separation, they're playing with the word. They offered him a vested pension. They pulled it off the table. Yes,
Do
sir.
you know for a fact that the mayor had contacted them and said, either Commissioner O'Neill, if Pantaleo's not fired, you'll be fired? Do you know that for a fact?
You'd have to ask the question, why such a reversal? Why so emphatic about what is on the table? They meet with the mayor, and then it's pulled off the table. That's a question for City Hall. But watch, like we said last time, watch for that Pinocchio nose. Where are we? Oh, yes, sir.
Are Lucy something that is still enforced, and do you think it should be enforced?
Right now, nothing's really getting enforced. What's happening is the public calls 911 and we respond. Quality of life issues are not being enforced. If it is enforced, the district attorney's offices are throwing them out and downgrading them. The message is clear. Don't go out and do your job. Now, remember, the public complained about this issue. The police commissioner was on TV and actually said that the public called and we followed. No police officer wants to go out and make arrests for Lucy's. No one. No one. We were sent out there to do it. So you'll fire Officer Pantaleo for this tragedy? You should quit. It was your policy. You should be fired because your policy didn't work. You sent this out. You made the policy. Quit or be fired. Not Officer Pantaleo. We were following the rules of the police department and the instructions from the chief of department's office, which is pretty damn high. Yes, sir.
Where did this meeting take place? It was on Friday in the afternoon or the morning?
It was early in the week off campus. It wasn't here. It wasn't at 1PP. We sat down for a cup of coffee.
And who was there from the NYPD? How many people were there?
Pat, myself, and a very high-ranking member who clearly had the apparent authority, the actual authority to speak on behalf of the police commissioner. No doubt.
He spoke out of turn?
No, zero.
Stu, how does it, given the politics of it, and given what happened, you said at the previous press conference, how did this come to be? Is that part of the rumors that maybe O'Neill was going to clear Pantaleo and then quit himself? Is that the vacuum that this meeting happened?
He spent a good time of his press conference today reading off how Pantaleo did his job. He spent his entire time saying, well, this is because of Deputy Commissioner Maldonado. He said it's happening because it's a process. And then he said, I'm going to uphold the decision of the judge advocate. Does he believe it? His words throughout says no. His words in the 120 precinct after this incident was, "You've done nothing wrong. We have your back." So you tell me if he changed his mind because the video changed. We know that didn't happen. He said, "I didn't follow the trial room each day." It was loaded with folks that worked for him. Do we really believe the biggest case that we're dealing with at this time that they didn't watch? I watched, and what I saw was a hearing of the evidence that proved that this was a tragedy, not a crime, that he was sent out there to do this job, that a tragedy happened, and there was no chokehold. And to say there was only 3 or 4 minutes when this all transpired, you're telling me you didn't watch that? I don't believe that. Yes, sir.
Did they formally pull this offer off the table and call you to tell you that, or was it just, yeah, we're not going to be able to do this and let it go?
The people I dealt with at One Police Plaza were preparing the paperwork for the deal. There were intricacies in the deal because it was a vesting option. So certain I's had to be dotted and T's had to be crossed. When I received the text, there will be no paperwork prepared this weekend, I knew what that meant.
So they never actually pulled it off, they just sent that text?
Well, to me, that's pulling it off.
Same thing.
Can you go into the details of the Article 78 proceeding? What exactly is arbitrary and capricious? What exactly did the grounds for appeal?
Sure. There were 2 sections to it. One is substantial evidence. You have to prove that there's substantial evidence to support the guilty finding. I submit there's not. I submit that so much, as Pat just indicated, of what the commissioner said in Maldonado's report, it's a roadmap to giving him a vested pension if he wanted to. He did everything right except for 3 or 4 seconds. So we will focus on that. We will also focus on de Blasio's involvement, indicating we're going to get justice for the Gardner family. Justice had to be a firing with no pension. And then second, the penalty, cruel and inhuman, draconian. We feel that being fired for this is cruel and inhuman treatment, that it is a penalty that doesn't fit the crime. There have been many alleged chokehold cases which have resulted in a penalty of 10 days. As Pat said, the verdict in this case should have been rendered on the evidence in that courtroom. It was rendered on politics trumping the rule of law, which is a disgrace to the judicial system and to NYPD.
Pat, are you suggesting that if he had cleared Pantaleo, the mayor would have fired the commissioner? Is that...
That's a question for the mayor. Do I believe that? If you're asking my opinion, if you believe that, yeah, I do. I believe the mayor got up in Detroit and said exactly what he expected. Do I know what's in his head? Common sense says if I give you a dictate and I'm the boss and you'll go against it, I think most of us here would be fired, right? That's a question for them. Pinocchio knows. Watch for it.
The mayor was just, it's only a press conference now.
Yes, sir.
He was just asked about this deal, and he said not to believe anything that you guys are saying.
Ditto in return.
Mr. Lambert, the trial judge felt Pantaleo's words untruthful.
Interesting. She is now commenting on what's called a compulsory hearing, which is a GO15 hearing that was done prior to the trial. She didn't see Pantaleo testify. She didn't judge his credibility.
Right.
She didn't see his mannerisms.
Right.
She's dealing with a cold record. If she had listened to what the federal government said, that his behavior was not a gross deviation from what a reasonable police officer would do under the circumstances, I think she would have had a different result.
Just think about the decisions that were made by a grand jury in a high-profile case. Then think about the Justice Department under 2 very different backgrounds, 2 different parties, 2 different philosophies, and both came back and said there's no crime here. So you have to ask the question, how did this kangaroo court of a trial room come to this decision, again, after the evidence that many of us watched? Yes, sir.
Just to go back for a second, when did you get the text message that they were pulling the deal?
Saturday during the day. After the press conference the mayor had with the police commissioner about those devices that were found all throughout the city.
And just one follow-up, you mentioned if the Article 78 is successful, you pursue other avenues. Could you lay out what the other possibilities?
Well, we could appeal it to the higher court after that, to the Court of Appeals.
The decision-
Hindsight's 20/20, but should you have maybe put Pantaleo on the stand?
Great question, Rocco. I couldn't. You know from the federal government, even in their decision, they said, we hadn't made a final decision until the disciplinary trial was over. The head of the Civil Rights Division was present in that courtroom. And when did she walk out? When I stated he would not be testifying. Clearly, his liberty is more important than his job, and that's why I made that decision.
There was a
He did. And, Rocco, he did testify in the grand jury, and they heard every word of his testimony.
And voted no true bill,
And
no
I
indictment.
know the feds had that testimony, because when I met with them, I said, you have his testimony, you don't need to hear from him. They acknowledged they had it.
So you have a trial commissioner not looking at the police officer when he was testifying, just going on a cold transcript. And if you were to look at that, I venture to say they asked his opinion and he gave his opinion. It was not a chokehold. He did what he was trained to do. So for her to say he was disingenuous or lying, based on what? Based on what? The grand jury didn't think so, and the grand jury had the opportunity to sit there and listen to the evidence, ask the questions, and more importantly, to look at him.
So it seems like you're saying that the comments to the IAD and grand jury were untruthful, but she doesn't really say that he lied. I mean, you're saying...
Well, I think she had a problem with him stating it wasn't a chokehold. First of all, the case wasn't about a chokehold. The case was about whether there was criminality involved in a reckless assault. So when he was on the ground for those 3 to 4 seconds with his arm around the neck, A, there's no way to show there's any pressure. B, Pantaleo has his weight on himself. And 3, he's not saying I can't breathe at that point. He maintained control. Within 3 seconds, he gets up. That's a reasonable amount of time to adjust your position. And he wasn't given credit for that at all. Like I said, she decided he was going to be guilty and then worked backwards. And that was the only window she had.
Pat, the PBA put in an email that the executive board is advancing a resolution of no confidence in both the police commissioner and the mayor. What would a vote of no confidence do?
A vote of no confidence would show that the captain has jumped ship, that the mayor has set up this scenario that we're working under, the conditions we're working under, and the police officers of this city have no trust in the leadership, have no confidence that they'll do what's right, not only for police officers, but for the public. The public has to be clear and has to understand that the police officers have no faith. This police department is rudderless. It's not drama. They're frozen. You've seen it. You're watching the videos. I'm not making it up. I've been around a long time. You've been around many, many years doing this job. Have you ever saw a time when police officers were getting abused and didn't enforce the law? You have to ask yourself why. Well, I'll give you the answer. We have no confidence that when we do our job, when we do as instructed, when we follow the law, that at the end of the day, we won't lose our job or lose our life. We have no confidence in both City Hall and the police commissioner's office. Today proved it. The job is dead. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that, obviously over the last 5 years, Pantaleo's ability to do his job has been compromised. But in the same breath, said that you want him to get his job back. In an ideal situation, how would his career even be able to continue to be a part?
He should be a New York City police officer, and we'll deal with that as we go. There's many assignments in the NYPD. Every assignment is not on patrol on the street. Many, many police officers play vital roles in this job and don't have contact with the public. The point here is not whether his reputation has changed in some folks' eyes. The question is, was he innocent or guilty? Did he follow the rule of law? Grand jury and the feds said otherwise. A kangaroo said that it is. So we shouldn't be basing it on what do we do with them after the fact. We should base it on truth and the facts, and they didn't do it. I'm sorry.
Public demonstrations planned similar to,
We'll be talking to our members as we move forward.
It's only been a couple hours, but what kind of reaction are you getting either from the telephone or from the internet or Facebook, from the public and from the membership?
From our members who we're focused on, that's our job as the PBA. They're outraged. they're brokenhearted, they're sad, all those emotions. As the police commissioner said, police officers want to go out and do their job. But they also want to know that that pact with society, that if you do your job and you do as you're asked, that we have your back. So imagine the confusion our police officers have when they learn today, for sure, we always have hope, that that chance is dead. That's how our police officers feel. They're sick to their stomach. They don't want to abandon their post. They're looking at a mayor who abandoned his. Chaos on the streets in Brooklyn. The Marcy houses. Violence, gunfire, bricks, garbage, thrown off the roof. 15 hours for the mayor to say, well, that's wrong? Where is his passion as a New Yorker? Nobody would say that's appropriate behavior. When will he come out and say, it ends today? It will not be tolerated. You cannot do that, and use every resource to make sure that happens. Saying we're going to collar the individuals and then giving them a discount and allowing them on the streets means nothing. They're back on the street before the police officers are, causing that mayhem. Look, chaos runs the streets. It took 15 hours. 15 hours for the mayor to say that. 15 hours. Why is that? There's no phones in Iowa or wherever he was. There was no televisions in one of the tents at the festivals. He didn't have his cohorts around him telling him what's going on in the city. He said he can run the city from miles away. He proved that he can't. No confidence that he wants this job. That's how our members feel.
How long have those negotiations been in place about that meeting, about the resignation and the vested pension? What time frame are you looking at?
Years. We've been pleading Officer Pantaleo's case for years, but it only comes to the point when they're making their decision that it really counts. Yes, ma'am.
We received at New York One a flyer that says wanted for criminal impersonation, and there's a picture of Jimmy O'Neill on it. Is that being circulated by the PBA?
It's being circulated, no doubt, by the members. We're very creative. But you have to ask yourself, why do they feel that way? Why would in this department, which we all know, we pride ourselves on sticking together because we have to, why would that be going out? I'll tell you why. Because we have no confidence after that press conference. We have no confidence after he said, fired. We have no confidence that he laid out a track record of a police officer that did the right thing and how brokenhearted he is after 34 years as a police officer, and then ended with, you're fired. That's why that's going around.
So you made it. There's two things.
No, ma'am. Anything else? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.